Okay. We should be going there. And just so you all know, Lyderick Ward, who is our webmaster, has actually gotten the first two videos of the book read up on the CAN website. We'll try to get something out to the listservs to call people's attention to it. I know for sure there were a couple of faculty members who had wanted to participate, but they happened to teach a class at this exact time. And so at least to be able to get them to be able to see the videos would be great. And today we're trying to finish this advisor reads by getting to all of these case studies. And when we were planning this out originally, we kind of thought instead of dragging the book out and having one chapter at a time, we could really knock out several case studies at once and just highlight what was great. Those first two chapters were very foundational. And then after that, every chapter in the book is just another opportunity to talk about ideas. Here's the fun thing. We have 4 presenters. We were supposed to have 5, and I forgot to recruit a 5th one. No one took chapter 3, which means I'm going to start us off by just really briefly going through chapter 3 and letting you know what it said. I have no presentation. I have no fireworks. This is just the best I could tell from the notes I took when I had originally read chapter 3. But the whole thing comes down to this idea of a life map, and they make that one word for whatever reason, it's their thing. And what they have their students doing from the time that they are first at orientation and working with advisors, there's a little bit of an element that's like a career coach or an academic coach built in there, but they call the first phase of the life map process college transition. And as an example of what they're doing, they challenge their students to talk about why a college education is possible for them. So really want them to talk about why they can get it done and to go ahead and have that be part of their vision for themselves and their vocabulary. So building this positive self-talk and kind of envisioning a future where they do finish a baccalaureate education. So you can think about all the things that go into college transition in terms of what do students need to be thinking about that maybe they've never thought about before. And they go through some of those things about like how do you select a major and thinking about what your plan for your college education might be. But they really follow that up in the second step, which is really kind of the first full semester while they're working with that advisor. They call that part Intro to College, and that's where they get into the degree maps. And one thing that I thought was neat from that, maybe pie in the sky, I don't know. They have the students design an individual study plan for each course that they have registered for that semester. And I know that a lot of advisors in AAC are doing that with Gateway students. But this community college committed to doing that with all of their students as a huge undertaking. But it is part of their process that they kind of map out like, how are you going to study for this class? When are you going to study? Let's get all of the important dates on the calendar, those kinds of things. So really teaching them how to be a student. That is their intro to college step. And then they get into step 3, which is what they call progression to degree. And kind of an example of this, it gets into career counseling, starting to think about connecting what they're doing now to the next steps. Are you going to graduate school? Are you looking to join the world of work? Do you need internships? Just thinking about, you tell me you want to be a guidance counselor in a high school. We all know that that's not just one degree, right? You're going to be going to a graduate degree. And being able to map that out a little further, getting out of the immediacy of surviving right now, surviving the semester, and starting to think, how does this connect to what's next? And then lovingly, they get to graduation transition, where they're talking to these students about now is the time, like graduation is around the corner. You need to make sure that you've got your resume in order. They try to help the students build a portfolio, and it wasn't entirely clear to me if they're doing this with every single student, but they are encouraging students, no matter what their degree path, to put together a portfolio of the kinds of projects they worked on, the skills that they've learned, any internships, so that they really have something that they can take away and use to sell themselves. And obviously the importance of the resume. And then at step 5, what they hope for the student is that we've achieved that lifelong learning attitude, that you're going to go out into your profession and then you're still going to need to learn more, but to have you be positioned as the kind of person who can do some self-assessment. What do I need to learn? What will be helpful for my goals or for my career right now? And then to be able to seek that out and find it. So I guess overall, I would just summarize, like it's a really impressive undertaking, and I don't know anything about their staffing ratios and things like that. That was the biggest concern I had coming away from that, right? Like if we're asking the fundamental question of, is this something we could do at EIU? Does it fit for us? My concern was just how in the world would we fit that in? And how do you make a good transition if a student starts with Amanda Harvey and then moves over to Julie Vertel? How do you pass along that life map? I think we could all get on board saying, like, these are good things that they should be working on. And I've seen recommendations before for have a degree plan, but then also have like an extracurricular, like these are the other milestones you should be working on, like build a resume, things like that. What do you guys think about this particular life map process?
I had the same thought that you mentioned, that just the time commitment was huge. Of course, you hear the word portfolio, that strikes fear in all of us anyway, but no, just the fact that you have to have a smaller caseload to manage all of that, in my opinion.
Something else that was kind of interesting is they showed some survey data for the students and the faculty. So it was like, it was a 3-year span or a 2-year span. The students, compared to the beginning year survey, they had a better understanding of what Life Map was all about and had written goals and knew how to map them out and achieve them. That's all very positive. Thought it was very interesting, though, that like the first year of the survey, 40% of the faculty could tell you what Life Map was. And by the last year of the survey, it was only 21%. I'm like, what happened? On their campus. So clearly something that I don't know if it got passed along to staff, academic service professionals, and the faculty got out of it. But yeah, definitely overall, just the concern, like how in the world could we get that done? Not much of an argument for me about the value of some of those exercises. So I know in AAC, we absolutely do that with Gateway students on some level. I mean, it might not be as formalized and as structured as this, but we do try to get them to talk about their goals. And I know a lot of the advisors this year flirted around with different ways of going about that, whether it was commitment cards where you're going to each week kind of set some goals and try to knock them out, or maybe at the beginning of the semester set some overarching goals, and we're going to ask you in each meeting what you've done to progress toward that goal. But and we're aware that there, probably because of COVID, that there are a group of students who are admitted through standard admission who in the past might have been Gateway, like maybe there's some grade inflation at the high schools and we don't have test scores to see. And so we know that there's some level that we need to expand that service. But yeah, even at that, we're kind of struggling with how do you fit it into the semester correctly? And with the changing landscape of orientation, that just complicates it further, because the advisors in AAC are going to have, through that week of April 10th to get continuing students registered and then shift their focus to the new students. And so just that time that it takes to be that weekly point of contact or that bi-weekly point of contact and to be that accountability partner. I don't think anyone is arguing that it's not valuable. It's just like, where does that resource come from? So, anything else about Life Map?
Well, I did want to share something that one of our departments has recently done. Political science has, in their 4-year plan this time around, included a to-do list for their majors, which is, I think, really helpful. I don't know if I'm able to share, but just to kind of give you an idea. Is everyone able to see this? Yeah, so this goes kind of just year by year in tangent with those classes of what the students should be thinking about. So this is, I think, was a really nice idea to continue to engage their students year by year, telling them, what they need to be working on, reminders, and this is extremely helpful for, general advisors because this came right from that department. So just kind of throwing it out there. So there is something kind of like that already starting. I'll go ahead and stop that.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you, Juanita.
Juanita, was that
Juanita.
shared directly with you, or do they have that on their website?
This is really recent.
Okay.
Yeah, because they know that we're going to be seeing our students fairly soon, but I do suspect it'll be on their website because they're still kind of tweaking it.
Okay,
And I just got this final version, I think late last week.
thank
Is
you.
it faculty advisors there? Is there a particular person in PLS that advises?
For political science.
Mhm.
So this was, I got this directly from the chair, but I know there's several political science advisors.
As faculty
Yes.
members? Okay, yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, that was nice. That was a good tool.
mhm.
And that is pretty similar to how they do things at Arizona State University. It's one of the models for degree plans. I've shared, I think, 3 or 4 different ones that are on the Complete College America website with the faculty chairs, just as an example of how can we, at a glance, say, let a student know how many math classes do you have to take in this degree, or does this degree require a foreign language, and those kinds of things, so that students can be aware of that. And then with these kind of co-curricular activities, the ways that you can develop yourself toward the next steps, that really becomes a handy checklist for all of us. So that would bring us to chapter 4. And that particular case study is Sam. So Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. So this one looked at Western Kentucky Community and Technical College, where they have essentially a one-stop advising center, and actually truly a one-stop student services center. So they call it the Master Advising Center, but they brought in a consultant in 2002. And what I appreciated here was that they gave their timeline. And for anyone who knows how impatient I am, I would have probably lost my mind, but they achieved what they wanted to and probably had a realistic timeline. So in 2002 is when they looked at starting to make their changes, and their overall goal was to move away from advising, where students simply chose their schedules and got signed up, to actually supporting the students and teaching them and helping them to learn. And so they decided to move all student services, financial aid, registrar's office, business services, advising, eventually the college bookstore and trio as well, all to one location. So they started in 2002. In 2008, they got most of them there, and then by 2011 got everything there. So they literally quoted, students didn't have to wander around campus, which I think we probably hear from our students a lot, between the student services building and the castle and McAfee and our offices. They're trying to figure out where on earth they're trying to go to get help. Oh, in the Union too, housing's over there. And so the other thing I really liked about having it all in one place is they also had united goals and talked together. And I felt like their goals and their mission statement were actionable items that could be measured in the end, so that they could actually gather data and talk about how to improve. And so they not only had all of these services in one area, but they also talked about how to support all of the services by being interdisciplinary, if you will, by having supplemental instruction and targeted advising based on test scores and giving students the option, take the test now or educate them. Maybe you shouldn't take your placement test right now. Maybe you should study for the next month with these study materials and come back, or maybe you should take this class first and then come back and take your placement tests, and really worked together with faculty and academics and advising and TRIO and other support services, as well as simple things like they could stay in the same building to go pay their bill as where they took their placement test. So I thought that was really great. They broke down their reporting structures, which seems somewhat similar to ours, but one thing I did find interesting is that a lot of things were all housed under the VP for Student Affairs that we spread across both our VP for Student Affairs and our VP for Academic Affairs. So I found that interesting that a lot of people reported more to one person. So maybe that is helpful in creating that one unified mission and then having feedback. They also made sure that advising was part of their full-time faculty job descriptions. So they used faculty advisors very much in the career planning and talking about what are you going to do with this degree or this certificate. And the faculty were required to complete training. The faculty were evaluated on their advising training as part of their tenure process and evaluation process. And faculty actually worked in the summer months for extra pay as part of the school's part-time employee payment to continue to be advisors. And it was really stressed that professional development and experience was important for those faculty members in order to engage in that summer. It wasn't a punishment to be there in the summer. It was a reward for their continuing dedication to being a good advisor. They also had within that model, veteran services, student success coaches, and workforce transition coordinators. Again, everyone working in student services were working together. I really enjoyed reading about how they made it actionable items to support that their change was working. And so they did degree plans. Having degree plans from every department was required, and they acknowledged that that was a really difficult thing to do, but could show then once we had degree plans, our graduation rate did better. They went through and reviewed, and this is a daunting task for sure, but reviewed all students who were in good academic standing who didn't come back for a semester, if they had actually completed their degree or how close they were to completing it, and reached out to those students and actually found nearly 100 students that had actually finished their degree and just not applied to graduate. And so again, had an actionable item, came out and did a measurable assessment and said, look, if we go through all these files, how many students are we going to find? Oh, they increased their graduation rate. They found 99 students that could graduate and just hadn't applied. So they could go back and say, administration, you gave us these resources and this is how it's going to benefit you. Now we look better on our graduation rate. And so I think that's something we sometimes miss here at Eastern. We gather data, but it's not something that we can do with the data and do something actionable to show like, hey, you should continue giving us resources, or we should really dedicate resources to doing this. They also talked about educating the students on the use of technology. So they implemented some new technologies, but they educated the students on how to access those technologies, didn't just assume students would know how to work the technologies. So I really appreciated that part of that. And then one of their conclusions was recognizing the efforts to increase enrollment alone do not ensure persistence and success. And I think that is something that's often missed when we're publishing, oh, our enrollment went up, our enrollment went up. Where's our retention? Like, did our retention go down? And so I really appreciated that that was one of the things that they pulled in, that they showed our enrollment went up and we kept them because we centralized things, which enabled us to collaborate together and make it easier on the student to get to that degree completion, and lots of eyes working together on it. So really, this chapter was all about why the one-stop shop worked for them and their students, and how they measured and proved that it worked for them and their students, but also that it took 9 years to fully implement the plan. So patience pays off. Am I supposed to have questions to elicit deep thinking now? I saw a lot of similarities between them and Eastern as far as the different support services that we provide. And then I saw what I think, or I hope some of the intent was, moving academic advising to McAfee, where testing services and TRIO are located, maybe were the goals of our administration, and how that is successful, making it closer for students, where at least McAfee's somewhat in approximation to the Castle and student services, and the Union versus 9th Street Hall was way far away. But I do think there's something to be said, literally having all those offices in one space. You're saying go upstairs versus go out the door, turn left, go down this sidewalk. If you hit this building, you've gone too far. It should be on your left. Once you get inside, now go upstairs, try to find your way around the castle, which I can't do. So I thought there was a lot of value there as well. I think we were possibly trying to target that here at Eastern. But if we were to try to do something like this at Eastern, being patient and giving them that many years might be one of our biggest challenges. Did anyone else see things that we could pull from this for EIU, or see where we're at EIU trying to do some of this?
Well, Sam, just thinking about what you were talking about, do we have an effort at EIU, or we find stop outs who just need to apply and graduate?
I've heard a couple individual advisors talk about the fact that they had done that. I've been crashing the Gen Ed party and heard about how they have been reviewing some of the requirements for graduation, how close people were. And that's one reason why the EWPs got knocked down to 2, was that they found that that was truly a barrier to graduation. And so do we just knock it down to 2? As well as that working group also found that we haven't done anything with the data. And so that was a eye-opening experience. I think that a lot of people weren't aware that nothing actually is being done with the data. And Dr. Susie Park was very frank about that, and it was refreshing. She's like, why are we collecting it if we're not doing anything with it? And so I think that was a big part of also reducing that down to 2. So someone looked somewhere and found that barrier.
I think excellent points on physical location. I remember as a student feeling very lost going from one to the other, you know. And the big one that I remember for opening weeks when we would drive the golf carts around was trying to find textbook rental. You know, that was where do we go? What street do we go on? You know, how do we navigate that? I did, and this was years ago, so it's probably a rumor, but they talked about trying to figure out a central location for all student services, kind of. You know, I don't know if it was a rumor or not, but the old steam plant, they talked about turning that into a different building. Obviously, that would be years and years ahead, but it does sound like it's been on the radar. And there is a need for it. And I think it would be a lot easier for new and incoming students to just have a one-stop shop. But, you know, it takes a lot of money.
Could have had Carmen Hall if they didn't let it go to crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, it that made me think of and I know it's different. I like that you pointed out, Sam, that it took about 9 years for this to come into fruition. So it definitely took patience. I know that whenever I was at Lakeland and came, they were transitioning to that, but I did hear before that it took years of, people realizing that there was a disconnect from I think career services was in one building, advising was in one building, TRIO was in one building, financial aid, we were all in one building. Test, what's the other one? Testing and tutoring was in one building. So everything, every office was, you know, it's because of the dynamics of how it's made. And so that's what led them to, you know, have that one-stop shop. And then you pointed out another comment, I think something similar, that EIU is working on, like the technology, not just putting it out there, but teaching students how to use it, such as D2L. I believe there's like a tutorial on D2L where someone developed a little badge where you get a certain badge if you completed it, because we do see a lot of students saying, I do not know how to use it, or I don't know how to check my grades. I did not know that I can, my syllabus, you know, my instructor put assignments on there, which your instructors tell them that, but just having students learn that. And I believe the library is developing something where they're trying to actually teach students how to use the technology so that it's easier to navigate.
That's a good point too, that I know that they're talking about, it may already be set for orientation, having sessions about how to read a syllabus. What is a syllabus? How do you read it? How do you understand it? I love that. Things like that, I think, need to happen, because students, I mean, office hours are such a question to students. They don't understand. Are you going to be there? You're not going to be there. You know, yeah. So it's just things like that that surprise us. They're like, oh, you don't understand that. Okay, let's talk about that. So I think that is fantastic.
So we're all going to dream of a giant student services building that houses everything. And
I mean, we have the castle already. Now we just need the unicorns and rainbows.
I think SIU Carbondale, that's what they evolved to. It's there used to be a parking garage where they have this beautiful building now where everything is housed. When I was there 100 years ago, they had this one building called Woody Hall. It was shaped in a U, red brick building. And they would say you did the Woody Shuffle because you would just bounce around trying to find your way through Woody Hall to go to the bursar. Your, you know, of course, you have different ways to register and things then, but it took them a long time. But now they have a really nice building that's very modern, and you know, the students can all, like you said, a one-stop shop. So it can happen. So
I know when some of us visited SIUC last semester, that building was really impressive. And except for, was it TRIO, Greg, that had its, like they intentionally kept themselves separate?
Yeah, I think so, for whatever reason. Yeah, I think there was kind of some competition. It sounded like there, you know, as far as like they felt like there was some overlap of services maybe, and so TRIO felt like they wanted to kind of keep their space separate just to differentiate their services from overall academic advising services. But yeah, I have to admit that building, yeah, I try not to be envious, but it looked nice. It was very, very nice.
But you know what? Totally unrelated to our Zoom today, but Greg, you remember we saw those really nice chairs in the library, and I made a mental note. I was passing through our library and saw the exact same chairs. So
that is true. The library has some pretty sweet stuff over there. They've done a nice job getting things in there.
But in addition to this wonderful building that Lisa's talking about that they built where the parking garage was, their library has multiple study spaces. I mean, it's really impressive also. We can continue to dream about what EIU will evolve into as we get our capital development plan together and actually get back to some things like maintenance on buildings. Anything else for chapter 4 before we move on to chapter 5? All right, well, that means it's Jeff Duck time. Everybody brace yourselves.
Right, let's do this. All right, can you see that PowerPoint? All right. First rule in presenting is you try to get the attendees' attention. So I try to use something funny. And unfortunately, my computer at home is a little bit more advanced than this computer. And so the dinosaur movements are not going to be there. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. All right. So William Rainey Harper College, established back in '65, named after the first president of Chicago University, or Illinois Chicago. And says they have like 28,000 4-credit students, which is huge. And they have the student advising through the life cycle in this chapter. So let me see if I can advance this. Let's see. Okay, how do I make this thing? There we go. Okay, so the overview will be a brief introduction, some brief history, the big picture scope, evaluation support, and a summary. So advising is seen from, and they use the term counselors in the chapter, not advisors, but the advising is seen from a community college perspective with a truly holistic approach with all stakeholders, including high schools, which I'll cover a little bit later, the college and universities, the administration, staff, faculty, and students involved to support and guide each student towards successful, either a degree, certificate, or successful transfer to another 4-year university. So I guess college attendance is higher, or it is higher, but the actual graduation rates have not increased. So back in 2009, President Obama created this national completion agenda where the idea is to get more students to graduate by 2020. And so William Rainey Harper has embraced that and using this approach. The big picture and the scope, what you see there, I liken this to EIU in a lot of ways, but it's kind of the spider web of how everyone is wrapped around supporting the student in the center. But they try to offer broad coverage supports to help students engage from their high school experience into the college and proceed toward graduation or transfer. And so for us, we have the new and new students in orientation. We have academic advising and counseling, multicultural. I'm not sure if we have a career center and women's program. We have disability services, we have psychological services and so forth, but they're all intertwined to help the students. So the chapter talks about advising touch points, which sounds kind of creepy, but that's what the terminology they use, where they're actually working with the student throughout their time at Harper. The biggest thing I noticed in the chapter is that every student is evaluated from the very beginning using the ACT Compass test to evaluate where they are with reading, writing, mathematics. And from there, their program is kind of tailored to them based on their needs. And so you have a breakdown with the onboarding, where they have the orientation, basic skill assessments, and then from 0 to 15 hours, they utilize what we call the early alert, and they call it Starfish, which I'll cover in a little bit. And then they have individualized success plans for each student very early on. Then they work into the career development course, probably like our focus too, over career services, where a student would take that and try to determine, what their interests are for career development, career path. And then all the way through their graduation checklist, job fair resume, and so forth. So the evaluation of everything, the recruitment, like I said, they start that early on, but in the chapter, they talk about the fact that they are partnering with high schools. They've adopted the same assessments that the high school use, and they're trying to prevent students who are coming to the college with having lower math skills in this example. I think it's other things as well, but they were trying to inspire and encourage their feeder schools, their feeder high schools with promoting math and making sure that the seniors all completed a math course was very important. And that increased their numbers at the college for students being able to jump into the college level math right out of the gate. Again, the assessments with the compass, they use that. They have other things they use as well. They call it Project Success. So every student is enrolled in Project Success from the very beginning. These are all at-risk students as well, but they go through all these different levels of engagement with the students. And then those students that don't do as well, they are using what they call the Starfish Early Alert software system. And again, it's very much like what we have here at EIU. The difference I noticed though in the book, they talk about the outreach for those students that are not performing well. They're not GAs or student workers or housing people, they're counselors that are actually going out and reaching with the student and making sure that they're really being assessed properly. The intervention is proper for them. So I like that. And so they also have this, it's the Reach Summer Bridge program for those that are at risk. So they've got this huge program where they bring in students for this intensive summertime training, basically scholastic, academic, all that stuff. And so they're looking at helping them become better college students, which I thought was very interesting. I don't know, we have the opportunity here at EIU to do that, I'm sure, but with housing and whatnot, but I thought that was very, very interesting. They also use for assessments the Gallup Strengths Finder assessment, which again, I believe that pretty much equates to what our Focus 2 program is and career services. And I know a lot of the students who complete university foundations are offered to take that. And it's the assessment is only a snapshot in time of what their interests are. So a student could take it one day, come back in a week, and have completely different interests and score differently on that same metric. The key is to have the student, after completing that assessment, go and talk to Bobby or other career services personnel and fine tune, what those results do mean and could mean for their program of choice and career path and all that. And I really got the feeling that this was mandatory at Harper for the students to do, which I think would be valuable. I know that it's the goal now to have every student take University Foundations at EIU, and that's good. But I'm hoping all the instructors will work with career services in using that Focus 2 program. So here is a little graph they had in there about the success rates for those students that did the Summer Bridge program. So those in the Reach Summer program, they did much better than the peers who didn't complete that summer program. And then the Project Success, the Starfish Early Alerts, again, I covered that. And then a SOAP is kind of the continuing support. So everybody's in Project Success, and if they don't do well, then their Starfish is activated to get the help that the student needs. And then in the second year, because it is just a 2-year college, then those that are not progressing well will go into the SOAP that's continuous. And they use the term, I think, twice in the chapter. It's called intrusive support. And it doesn't really describe that, but I envision that, number one, the students are mandated to do certain things, meet with certain groups and peoples and so forth, and find, the resources. It's not a matter of, and I see this like in the chapter at the very end somewhere, that's the goal is for students not to search for services, but to be engaged in such a degree that the relationship is ongoing and the resources are part of the regular campus experience. So they really try to infuse it with everything, within everything, to make sure the students are helped. I got the impression also that where we might see students once a semester for advising or more if they're having problems. They at William Rainey Harper, they mandated that they're going to see their advisors in groups and also individually to cover things like we mentioned in other chapters of support. So I thought that was interesting. Here's the My Advising Student portal. And I think this is going to be like what we're going to be offering sometime soon, but the student can go in and it's kind of like off of Banner, I guess, a little bit, or off of Pause, but they're able to get questions answered in there and different things. So it was a success because they're trying to utilize more technology in helping the students progress. So the program support, again, Harper College recognizing the important role professional development plays in staff and faculty. The new staff, they're offered an intensive 8-week program that covers a lot of different items, including things that are listed down below, but also they have ongoing training yearly for experienced advisors, but things they cover like autism, crisis intervention, suicide prevention, diversity, transfer advising, and so forth. The summary on this, I thought was, what I got the impression was, I mean, they spent a couple $1 million on one of these items. I can't remember which one it was, but it felt the way it was written that it was very top-down supported from the administration, that everyone bought into it and the resources were there to help the counselors, advisors, help the students be successful. They did offer continuous training for the counselors, and there was buy-in from all stakeholders, even high schools trying to get students ready. They even mentioned a program working with the University of Illinois where students, if they follow this very specific program, then they could transfer to the U of I into their engineering program. And I think they were very successful with that. So there's a lot of similarities and differences to EIU. Like I said, I think the similarities are the My EIU, the portal we're going to have with theirs. The one thing I think that's different is that we don't, at least I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, correct me, but we don't mandate like an ACT Compass test for everyone coming in. We do have testing available, math placement and whatnot. And I think that sometimes can hamstring us. If we don't have the ACT or now the SAT test and we're going off high school, well, we don't know if that high school is, and we hope that they're grading those students accurately and not grade inflation or anything like that. So a kid comes in with a 3.5 high school GPA, but then they come to our whatever Comp 1 class or basic math and they're failing. So I think it would be beneficial if we could somehow, which I know it's a very busy time in the summer prior to fall registration advisement for freshmen, but if we could somehow figure out to offer, not offer, but mandate this testing, so we'd have this baseline for us to see where the student is, because they, who knows if they took math that senior year or whatever else, and they're going to get here, and then we are kind of putting band-aids on problems after the fact. If we don't know, we say, oh, the kid's struggling. Well, we have these services for them, but do we mandate that they access them? I think at William Rainey, they do. They mandate that they go to these different resources. We just say, here you go, kid. Here's the resources. You be the adult and you choose and pick and you make it happen. Well, we know that that's not going to be a good pick for all students. There are going to be some who, or many could fall through the cracks. So I think that's something we could improve on, would be that baseline testing, and somehow is there a way to make sure that they're going to all these tutoring or whatever it is? And are we offering enough resources as campus advising, for these group sessions? Maybe we should prescribe or recommend that we have a Saturday or whatever. I mean, I know we're fighting against students who want to be independent and not come to these things, but if we have an auditorium for study skills or whatever, or career path choice with career services, that they have to go and listen, you know, and then follow up. There has to be some kind of a follow-up with that to say, yes, I went to my career paths seminar, and then I met with somebody career services and or my advisor to explore it more. And we kind of check the box that it's been done. So I don't know. That's what I had for chapter 5. Do you have any thoughts or questions for me?
No, I love getting students involved in the career exploration process because I think a lot of times they have mistaken impressions about what a career is and what it takes to be successful in the academic path that leads to some careers. Definitely an issue of resources there that I feel like Bobby and John are about stretched as thin as they can be and do great work, but then they have like, you know, it's one of those, she was saying earlier this semester, I mean, I think she was saying in a January meeting, if kids don't get on my calendar by mid-February, then it's going to be like 6 weeks out or something like that. And that's really tough, is figuring out how to do that if we're not going to provide more personnel. And I think it makes a huge difference to students, whether they're undeclared or they're very declared. Sometimes it really just helps to know, what am I trying to get into and what does that mean for me as a student? And am I willing to sacrifice in the ways that I would need to be successful? I think that's great that they're able to do that up the road. And because no one else is picking up on it, I'm going to mention that I paraphrased Sam Langan today in a meeting when I said, you know, if we're going to do the University Foundations class, if we're going to do EIU 1111 and try to get it to as many students as possible, I would love for us to find a way to either make it fit into the gen ed so that it's meeting some graduation requirement, or make it free. You know, it would be that would definitely be an exercise of demonstrating the all-in mantra.
Maybe I became too narrow-minded and singular focused, but I really loved that at Harper, they're talking to the high schools about what math they need to take and wondering, are our admissions counselors even aware of that, to have that conversation with students? Not faulting them, you don't know what you don't know. And then especially coming out of COVID, when we all know, frankly, a lot of schools do have arbitrary grades in there. Like, when you think about these students, freshmen, sophomores, and junior years, did they just get passed on so that they could graduate? And did anybody follow up on knowledge content there? So I respect the test optional in order to eliminate a barrier, but how many more of barriers are we putting up in front of them? Because again, I know it's money, but how much is $15,000 to this university to test all of our students so that we know we're putting them in the right classes versus spending 6 figures on new positions that we don't have actionable job descriptions for, quite frankly, in some cases. So what are they doing on a daily basis to impact our students' lives more than what putting a student in the correct level of math, English, or other coursework would be for that student?
Is that the number 2? Or just a guess on your part, the 15,000?
I was just a guess, thinking of, okay, if we're bringing in so many students, and I was just saying, like, okay, if we have 1,500 new students and it's $10 a test to do all the testing, plus thinking about manpower for evaluating all the testing and stuff like that, just literally a made up number. I don't know how we could get an actual number, but maybe if we could look at how much all of our tests would cost us to test every single student, and then try to figure out how long it takes to evaluate each placement, and then try to quantify that based on a couple people's salaries. Maybe it's useful.
I was hoping Amber would be here today to talk about that testing aspect. I'll have to reach out to her.
But I would argue the man hours saved by advisors would significantly offset that cost for the man hours it takes to review and put some type of notation on where they should be for the different classes.
All right, well, we've got about 10 minutes left. We've got 2 more to get through. I believe Greg is up next with chapter 6. What can you do for us, Greg?
There we go. Now that I'm unmuted, I think I can take it from there. Yeah, let's see what we got. So I am sharing information about Indian River State College. They're down on the east coast of Florida, and they went with an individualized student advising program. So that's what I have to share with you from chapter 6. So, and the time frame on this, just to kind of set the stage, goes all the way back to 2001. They did a series of focus groups. They included students, administration, faculty, and staff. So they did some focus groups because they had definitely some concerns about advising. And I think maybe it's my history background, but I think we got to know kind of what they were coming from to go into what they ultimately decided to choose to do. So the previous model of advising, all advising was completed on a walk-in basis. All right, so that's kind of where they were coming from. Students often saw a different advisor each time they visited, and the students in those focus groups were frustrated by long lines and disorganized services. So that was their previous model. So they're like, what can we do about this? Because obviously those are some challenges. So what is the new advising program model they came up with? Well, they called it individualized advising. And so kind of 6 key ideas or components that went with that. 1, student services were going to be located together in one place. So we kind of heard a little bit about that in Sam's chapter, but IRSC also went with a similar approach. Each student was going to be assigned a designated advisor. All right. And so that is important. Not only are they assigned a designated advisor, but they actually have that advisor from the day they are admitted all the way through to graduation. So that's a whole new model for sure. And then every student is going to be given an individual advising plan. They call it the IAP, and that's maybe the key part of this also, is that individual advising plan. We'll talk a little more about that briefly. Also, a big difference. Each advisor was going to be cross-trained to meet most of a student's needs, including admissions, assessment and placement, financial aid, advising, and registration. So your advisor was that primary point of contact for all of those services that the college offered. This is all going to be connected through technology. So definitely use of technology is part of it. And they also designed a new facility to house them to support this new model. And so those things all kind of went together and created this individualized advising program that they chose to go with. So that's definitely what they were looking at. Let's dig into that individualized advising plan because that's kind of the key part of it. Mapped out all the required courses in a student's program of study in sequence by semester. Now that we kind of know as a 4-year plan, but this was truly an individual advising plan. So when an advisor sat down with a student for that first appointment, during the summer before they started in the fall semester, they created an IAP to take that specific student through their graduation semester by semester. So that's definitely a little bit more advanced, more involved, I should say, than a 4-year plan. That's kind of a generic model of it. And then that individualized plan was stored within their advising module, within their student information system, and it was accessible to students through their version of PAWS. They call it My IRSC, but it's their PAWS, and it was accessible to them. They could modify it as needed with an advisor's assistance. But not only was that plan created, it was imported into their online class schedule search. So when a student goes to register for classes there, all available sections of their classes in the plan were displayed in their version of PAWS. So really streamlined that registration process and allowed them to rely on that plan for them. And what they found, and I should say this all happened beginning in April of 2007. So it took them about 6 years to implement it. But what they found when they went back and looked, advisor time was freed up for more in-depth advising and additional follow-up with students who they found really needed some more of that personal interaction, personal support. We certainly know students need that, and they found this was a way to give them more time to do that. What they found based on the data was that students who had those IAPs, the individual advising plans, had a higher cumulative GPA, had higher persistence and higher retention rates. So they definitely found, in their opinion, that it was beneficial for them. Something else that they also did, and I mentioned this just because we are, of course, changing our orientation. There was a new student orientation piece to this as well. They started providing a mandatory online non-credit course. It was required for all first-time students, including dual enrollment students. So any student who took a class there, whether they were in high school or ready for college, had to complete this new student orientation before they registered for the next term. So their orientation was something they really did during that first semester of enrollment. It was self-paced modules, a series of them in their version of basically D2L, their learning management system. They figured it would take students about 5 hours, anywhere in that 4 to 6 hour range, to complete all of those modules. The topics included anything from financial literacy, student activities, library resources, as well as academic support services. And part of that orientation was requiring the students complete an IAP with their assigned advisor. So that was kind of how they chose to approach orientation, which is kind of interesting that they did that mandatory online course, kind of similar to what we're looking at starting this summer. So just kind of a piece I thought was kind of interesting. So that's a really quick kind of summary of what that model was like. So I would like to kind of throw it open to everyone. What do you see might be the benefits of that? And certainly we'll also talk about the challenges too, but let's start with the benefits. Anybody have some ideas on what you see as benefits if this model worked at EIU? How would it benefit EIU potentially?
I will say, I know several of the departmental advisors, though it's not from freshman year, but as soon as students come to us, we put together that degree completion plan individually for students. And what I have found is it helps them understand what a misstep means as a domino effect, as well as what success means. Like, success means you're doing this here and here, and they meet those milestones. And I put it on their advising worksheet, and I can see an outward reaction each semester when if it's successful, taking those things off, and when it's unsuccessful, oh, now I see you're having to copy and paste those classes later. And so I think it just helps them see it for them on a personal level, which obviously it's personalized advising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that definitely is a benefit. For sure. Yeah, it kind of helps them kind of see visually how each of those semesters kind of impacts another. Yeah, for sure. Definitely, I think that could also increase success, persistence, and retention. I mean, those could definitely be benefits. Of course, a one-stop model, we kind of talked about it with SAMS. That would be really cool to have a one-stop location on campus that we could utilize that. And we do already have designated and assigned advisors. Now, it's not from that first moment of admission, although pretty early on in the sequence, obviously we don't take them through with the same advisor all the way through to graduation. And I think that kind of leads into some of the challenges with this, because, yeah, when we look at those challenges, for one thing, a one-stop location, as we kind of talked about, would require renovation or a completely new facility. Obviously, we're talking money there as well. But also one advisor all the way from admission to graduation at a 4-year university, that would require a total redesign of our advising model. So, I mean, I think at a 4-year school, that's a long haul to go all the way from beginning to end. And also that IAP, I think it's easier for a 2-year institution to do that mapping out 2 years to graduation than it is for a 4-year institution, where if I'm sitting down with a freshman just out of high school and mapping out at least 8 semesters to get them to graduation, could we do it? We could. It's going to take a while, and realistically, it's going to have a lot of changes between now and the end of the line. So I think it's a little easier for a 2-year institution, or certainly when they get to SAM, where maybe they do just have 2 or 3 years left. That is a little bit easier than trying to take it from the very beginning all the way through to the end. You know, a couple other things, one stop, or I should say a cross training for all of those services would be pretty difficult as well, I think, because they were really wanting the advisor to kind of be that point of contact for all those different areas. And that would be a challenge. I think certainly knowing a little bit about some of those areas could be helpful, but to truly be cross-trained for all those services, that would be a challenge for us. And even pause, you know, to use that IAP for registration, we're just not able to do that, at least as far as I'm aware right now. So to me, those would be some challenges, but there could certainly be some benefits, but I don't know that as a whole, the whole system would work. So I'm open to any thoughts if anybody wants to throw anything else out there.
Yeah, that piece about the cross training sounds like the kind of thing that you might get at a small private school, right? Like where that's just kind of the nature of the landscape. It is possible for us to build out 4-year plans in DegreeWorks and then have those plans imported into College Scheduler, and it try to build a schedule of what the advisor recommended. But even that would be a big change. We'd have to actually use DegreeWorks in that level, and we'd have to make sure all the bugs are gone so that it wouldn't accidentally delete whatever great plan that, you know, like Lisa puts in a great plan for her business student, and then the student changes majors for 5 minutes and it gets erased or something. So we'd have to make sure, but it's definitely possible. I always, excuse me, I always go back to the, what is the role of intrusive or proactive advising? You know, wouldn't it be great if we could double check on our student schedules after they've registered and kind of see like who went off the rails and why, and, you know, try to stop some of that before we get to it 4 weeks into the semester and they're like, oh yeah, I'm failing this biology class. And you're like, that's not the class I told you to take.
Yeah, the interesting thing is they actually use technology to do that. Their system reports were available to alert the advisor if a student didn't follow the IAP, so that the advisor could then reach out to that student and say, hey, so are you going a different direction, or did we just mess something up here? So yeah, pretty interesting.
So, okay, we're actually over the 12 o'clock mark, and I want to respect everyone's time, and Jarek had a 12 o'clock meeting. So what's going to happen is Jarek and I are going to have a Zoom later where he presents his chapter, and we're going to upload that to the CAN page and get that out in a link to everyone so that you won't have to miss his content, but you don't have to give up any more of your time. So, all right. Thank you all for being here, for participating, for having ideas, and we'll look forward to when Rosie donates millions of dollars, the new Rosie Myers Bradley Student Services building that will fix everything. All right, take care, everybody.
I would do that if I had $1 million.
I believe you.